Hi, I'm Vicki of the University of Minnesota. Welcome to Inside Minneapolis.
Hello and welcome to Inside Minneapolis. I'm Phil Lindsay, and this is the show that talks about different issues and places in Minneapolis. For this edition, we're up here at Fire Station 20 in North Minneapolis, right on Humboldt Avenue at Shingle Creek. And we're going to take a look at the Humboldt Greenway project, a major project in this part of town. And to do so, we're going to talk with people about kind of the big picture from a design point of view. We're going to be talking about the roadway and housing opportunities, as well as neighborhood expectations. But first, let's go and hear from Mike Opat, Hennepin County Commissioner, from his point of view, talking about the Humboldt Greenway.
I think maybe the best way to understand the big picture of the Humboldt Greenway is to think about it as remodeling a neighborhood. Just as we do with our houses from time to time, we remodel them to bring them up to date. I think the Greenway is the best chance we have to bring those two neighborhoods a little more up to date. Now, what I mean by up to date is I've seen my peer group who grew up in the neighborhood lose a little bit of confidence in it and not relocate their families there when they're ready to buy a house. Instead, they buy in the suburbs. They're looking for a little different kind of house than is in the neighborhood. And I think the Humboldt Greenway can provide an extension of the parkway system, provide some housing that competes with the suburbs, and then on the other end of life, if you will, for seniors that are ready to move out of their houses, offer them a chance with our senior complex to stay in the neighborhood rather than move to Robbinsdale or Crystal or one of the other suburbs that seem to have a lot of senior projects. Certainly one of the signature parts of the city of Minneapolis is the parkway system. Theodore Wirth was a genius, and his genius is evident today. In fact, if you look at property value changes throughout the city of Minneapolis, what is crystal clear is that the housing that is near the parkway system retains its value better than any other property in the city. And I think everyone who's been involved has cooperated willingly and should take a sense of accomplishment with the Greenway. But particularly the neighbors should feel accomplishment because they have been instrumental to this project going forward. What continues to excite me about the Greenway and building it is the dream of standing on 49th and Humboldt one day and looking north and seeing Olson Junior High off in the distance across the public way, and then looking south and seeing the creek and seeing it enhanced and seeing the senior site down near the railroad tracks rising above the banks and above the fire station. I think when I'm out there and stand there a minute and forget all the planning and forget all of the hurdles we have to go over and think about the end result, that's what keeps me going, and I hope that's what's going to keep the neighbors going over the next couple years.
Well, and welcome back. You are watching Inside Minneapolis, and I want to thank Mike Opat for his overview, kind of the really big picture about the Humboldt Greenway project. And of course, Hennepin County is deeply involved in this. And with me is my next guest, Dan Marckel. He's a research fellow with the Design Center for American Urban Landscape. That's at the University of Minnesota. And he's going to help us get an understanding maybe of some of the design issues, kind of the big picture about design. So pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Phil. It's nice to be here.
Thank you, Dan. And you've actually been helping to educate me about some of the larger parameters of this project. But for our viewers who don't know, can you briefly describe the Design Center for American Urban Landscape, what it does and its role on this project?
Sure. The Design Center is a research unit in the College of Architecture and Landscape Architecture at the University of Minnesota. And we work with communities. We do applied research in communities to talk about and to help communities think through the physical aspects of the projects they might be considering.
Okay.
In this project, we've been doing some preliminary research about the area, about the needs and the issues. We've worked with the community quite a bit to gather the perceptions of what the community thinks, and we've sort of stayed in touch with the project as it's gone through the design phase up till now.
Well, and I know from a previous guest we had on an earlier show from your center, when you say some neighborhood meetings, I'll bet quite a few meetings.
Well, it was quite a few meetings.
Yeah.
We've at one stretch we had about 45 meetings in the period of about 6 weeks.
My word.
Yeah, we sort of.
I hope you get mileage. That's pretty impressive.
Actually, I do.
Okay.
The great thing about the meetings that we had, we really got a chance to see the neighborhood through the neighbors' eyes. What did they think was important? What did they think was crazy about the project as it was proposed at the time? What did they think was really worth reinvesting in the neighborhood for?
Right.
And that has come around to inform the project as it's moved along.
So it comes in both directions really simultaneously. They help inform you because they're here on the ground. This is their home. But you're bringing in some fresh ideas, maybe some more universal ways to look at things.
That's right. Residents understand the neighborhood from a very personal level. They know what works and what doesn't work. What it's hard sometimes for residents to understand is the larger picture, to back off and to see things in ways that are maybe a little more analytical. So this project has been quite useful in what we've been able to do is have both perspectives.
Right, and I should explain to our viewers that some of the images you'll be seeing is from tape that we took over at your design center and explaining some of the geographic parameters of this project, which is pretty extensive. Maybe you can kind of outline for us the broad outlines of this Humboldt Greenway project.
It is a pretty broad project, and it stretches a long distance too. That's something unique about this project. This project goes from Victory Memorial Parkway along Humboldt Avenue all the way up to 53rd Avenue.
Right, and that would be from the south up to the north, linked by Humboldt.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's really the central spine of this project. It is approximately a mile long. It also includes an area that goes from I-94 all the way over to Shingle Creek.
And
so that's east to west.
Right, and I think that's the part that I was the least aware of, is this tremendous east-west link, not least of which will help unite, and this is something else you shared with me, some of the schools, and this will mean a lot in terms of the schools that exist. Can you talk a little bit about those institutions?
Sure. This neighborhood is blessed, the neighborhoods are blessed with a rich amount of schools. There's Olson Junior High, there's Jenny Lind Elementary, Our Lady of Victory has elementary school, and then Shingle Creek Elementary are all essentially in a line along between Bryant Avenue and over to about Penn Avenue. This project's going to hopefully connect those schools so that kids, as they go through the schools in the neighborhood, they'll be able to get easily from one school to another. They can get from home to their schools.
Okay. Another defining feature in this area, of course, is Shingle Creek itself, and that happens to be right behind us here, right over our shoulders. Can you just discuss a little bit about Shingle Creek and its importance, not only to this project, but to these communities that it goes through?
Sure. Shingle Creek is as important to this community as Minnehaha Creek is to South Minneapolis. It reaches from the Mississippi River all the way up through these neighborhoods, and it goes at a sort of diagonal through the neighborhood, so everyone's quite close to it. It then keeps going out and ends up, I believe, in Maple Grove.
Okay, so it actually enters the city and heads, what, on a generally southeasterly
That's right.
route towards the river?
It enters the city pretty much where Brookdale is right now.
Okay.
And then goes southeast, past and through all these schools, and then down to the Mississippi at about the Camden Bridge area.
Wow. So again, another unifying feature here to the community.
That's right. It's an extraordinary green link that most neighborhoods don't have the opportunity of.
Am I right in assuming then that not only the hard surface, the streets here that we're talking about, Humboldt, for instance, and what is it, 50th, 49th, some of those heading east and west?
Right. 49th actually is a bridge across I-94, and 50th will be a connection between the two schools.
And in addition to them, this green corridor of the creek, this is what you're helping to knit together in terms of streetscape, landscaping, redesign?
That's right. The small corridors that we're inserting through here are very significant in this project because they will allow us to provide links for people to do, number one, recreational walking. They'll be able to walk the dog after supper or go for a bike ride on Saturday. But they'll also allow people who are driving into the neighborhood to get a really great image of these areas.
Well, that's great. Good opportunity to make the best use of. You brought with you a couple of illustrative maps. I mean, these are very dramatic in what they were. Could you walk us through briefly here what these maps tell us?
Sure. One thing we should know is that when you do a lot of public meetings, things tend to get a lot of use. And this one has wrinkled up over time.
Well, and plus we've got you out here in inclement weather, so
The
bless your
humidity
heart for
helps too.
putting this through that.
These are a couple of maps that we use during public meetings early on to really present the ideas of this project to the neighbors who are interested in the project. This is a map of Hennepin County, all the way out here. Here's Dayton, all the way out here to Minnetrista, down here's the Minnesota River,
Sure.
and Minneapolis sits right here.
Which, for our benefit of our viewers, mostly where you see the blue color.
Right. What you see here, the colors the colors represent the percentage of change in residential market values. In other words, what direction are home prices going? So blue means that home prices between 1986 and 1996 actually decreased in price, real dollars. The light blue becomes up to 20% increase, or about 2% per year.
Okay, so a nominal increase, but
Right. And then yellow, orange, and red. Red means that it's increased 60% or greater per year. So that's a pretty healthy rate of growth, faster than the rate of inflation. So essentially what we see is the areas out here that have been developed and are developing are doing quite well on appreciation. The areas that are in here are not doing quite so well. Now this is information that came from the Hennepin County property assessor. And what it shows is that these areas need some sort of help. The idea of this project is that some of the taxing capacity of the whole county be used to reinvest strategically in areas like this, while Minneapolis is also doing the kind of reinvestment that it typically does.
Sure.
So here's the two neighborhoods that we're concerned with here. Humboldt Avenue goes right up through the middle of this top area. Then right north of this line is Brooklyn Center. So Victory Memorial comes around this way, Shingle Creek runs through the neighborhood this way, and Humboldt goes right up through the neighborhood this way.
Okay, so what you're really describing here is an opportunity, correct me if I'm wrong, but to kind of capitalize on the success sort of outside those boundaries and maybe bring some of that success and opportunity into that area that's depicted by blue.
That's one of the things. Let's talk about it from the other direction too. We know one of the founding principles of the program Hennepin Community Works was that the Parks and Parkway system, or really well constructed physical infrastructure, actually has a stabilizing effect over a long time. So the parkway system is good for property values.
Right.
And even though this map, you can't maybe see it on TV, but the larger version of this map shows that where the parkway system runs through, property values are actually doing reasonably well.
Right.
So while we are trying to get some of the success of the outer areas in here with new housing, new infrastructure, we're also trying to make the strong parts of the city and extend them out into these areas. So we're extending the parkway system.
So again, it's in both directions.
That's right.
Now we have just a minute left. Did you have another map you could very briefly share with us here?
Sure. This map was of great interest to people because it showed a general area of property values going down. This map shows the actual neighborhood itself. Humboldt Avenue is here. Shingle Creek comes through here. And a similar map, dark blue, means property values are decreasing. Obviously, there's a huge collection of properties that were in some sort of stress over here.
Right.
And so this became the area where most of the project is being done.
Sure.
This is the area of greatest reinvestment.
And again, a great graphic representation that probably allows and helps planners, designers, to take a look and say, okay, how can we bring in some nuts and bolts here to make this improved?
Right, and it works for the planners to be able to concentrate on an area and really try and fix it. It also worked in the neighborhood groups because we were able to show this map, and people realized, you know, maybe that area does need a little sprucing up. We need to do something about that. And it got everyone, it let everyone agree that some sort of reinvestment needed to be done.
Great.
Then the discussion was, what sort of
Now
reinvestment?
what? And that's where the design comes in.
That's right.
Well, Dan, thank you very much. Thanks for the overview.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Phil.
all of it. Well, we'll be back in a moment to talk about some of the infrastructure issues. We'll be talking about roadway construction and some great housing opportunities up here in the Humboldt area. But first, we're going to take a look at our monthly feature that we call Did You Know? An interesting fact about this part of Minneapolis. Stay tuned. Well, and welcome back. And as usual on Inside Minneapolis, we always get an interesting bit of research and history. I did not know, for instance, some of that history about Jenny Lind herself, who the school is named after. And by the way, earlier in this century, on that current school site, there was a crematory, the old city workhouse, and a hospital. So the things you learn on Inside Minneapolis. Now, later on in the show, we're going to do our monthly What the Heck feature. And what you'll be looking at right now is the image that we went out into the community and asked a few passersby, what the heck is that? And of course, we'll answer what the heck that is later in the show. For the next segment, we're going to talk with two gentlemen who know things about what I'm calling infrastructure. We're going to be talking about some roadway issues up here in the Humboldt Greenway and some great housing opportunities. And to do that, we've got Ross Fefercorn, who's with Country Home Builders. Thank you for being here. Pleasure to have you here. And Gary Erickson. He heads the Hennepin County Transit and Community Works departments. Did I get that right?
That's right.
It's these long titles that I've got to remember here. And gentlemen, you're really involved now in helping make things get real here in this project. And I thought I'd start with you, Gary. Obviously, Humboldt Avenue is a fairly significant corridor. It's a roadway here. But given, as we were just talking with Dan, some of the other issues here, east and west issues, a number of other streets, the interstate comes in, roadway construction becomes a major issue here. Can you talk a little bit about some of those kinds of questions that you folks have to take a look at?
Sure. One of the things we want to do is make sure that we stage the project so we don't disrupt the community, significantly all at once. So we plan to build the Humboldt portion, the north-south roadway, in the year 2000, starting in the spring of 2000, and then construction through that summer, hopefully wrapping it up in the fall.
Okay, so that's coming right up, really.
That's
just
coming up
next
very
construction
quickly.
season.
That's correct. Now, there are things that can toss the schedule off kilter a little bit. Weather is always one. If we have a long, rainy summer, we could fall behind and stretch the project into 2001.
As we're having right now,
That's
as
correct.
we sit here, so yes.
And the utilities are always, we don't foresee any major problems, but they're all underground. You don't know. We plan to leave some in place. We may find out that there's some problems and we want to do some replacement that wasn't planned.
Okay.
The east-west streets, 49th, 50th, and Shingle Parkway, we plan to do in 2001. So we'll be carrying out, stretching out the total construction, but we'll try to limit it to the north-south 1 year, east-west the
Right,
following
give people
year.
a reasonable shot at sort of adapting
Correct.
in process.
And we will handle traffic during the project. There are opportunities to keep traffic flowing through the project because we're off of the main roadway. We have to coordinate with the housing work, obviously.
Sure.
But we'll try to maintain project traffic through it. There may be some temporary detours where people are
Right.
brought around the project for short periods of time.
Well, and as you indicate, there's a nice connection to the housing. We're going to talk with Ross in a moment about that. I wanted to ask, though, down where Humboldt on the south end of this connects with Victory Memorial Drive, will there be any new construction down there? Is this where it links? Is that the southern end of this project?
It goes all the way down to Victory.
To Victory.
Now, it won't go south other than maybe just a little bit work on the far side of the intersection to match the north side.
Okay.
But the primary construction will be from north of Victory all the way up to 51st.
Up to 51st, okay. And for folks who aren't aware, am I right in assuming that Hennepin County really kind of started the ball rolling with this whole project? Did this not come out of Hennepin County's policy debates and issues?
That's correct. The county commissioners discussed opportunities of how we could provide some rejuvenation of neighborhoods. And the feeling was that community works infrastructure projects was a possible stepping stone or tool to help that happen in areas of the county that we're starting to break down in infrastructure.
Right, need a little more attention.
That's correct.
Given that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks, Gary. And it's a fairly large project, I mean, both geographically and Ross Fefercorn, in terms of numbers of people that have been affected and will be. Not to put you in the spot, but how many folks are we talking about here? How many houses will be demolished or sent away, and how many more are coming in? Is that a number you know?
Yes, there's approximately 210 housing units, I believe, that are going to be removed from the area. We'll be constructing approximately the same number of homes, although they'll be in different lot configurations. There'll be some different lifestyle choices. So, for example, you could buy a single-family executive home, a single-family starter home. You could buy a lifestyle townhome on one level, or a lifestyle townhome on two levels for a professional couple or single individual. So it'll put a lot more variety into this area that is predominantly now smaller single-family.
Well, as you described, that's a nice palette of choices for people.
Correct. It is consistent with what is popular in selling in other areas of Hennepin County and the metropolitan area, whether it's suburban or urban. There just aren't a lot of opportunities like this in an urban setting.
Right, and now to some extent, I know you happen to have an architectural background in addition to being with your current company.
Correct.
So some of this you bring to the table yourself, but you also did a market study to find out what people are interested in.
Correct.
Any surprises there?
Not really, no. I think that the market study is fairly consistent with what we thought a year ago when we got involved in the project, and that is that a number of the new buyers are going to come from the urban environment. They're going to enjoy living in the city. They just don't have new housing opportunities right now. The city loses population to suburban developments all the time because that's where the new housing is. Older housing stock can be somewhat frustrating in terms of maintaining mechanically and structurally and so on and so forth. So this should be a great opportunity. We're also hoping that there will be in-migration back from the suburban areas in terms of the interest in the housing, as well as other areas in Minneapolis. For example, if you have a family and you live in South Minneapolis and there isn't the single-family home you want, you may choose this area of North Minneapolis as an option. You're staying in the city, you're on the same Grand Rounds Parkway system. Why not just move a little bit north?
Yeah.
In fact, we've met people in the neighborhood who found great housing values here on Victory Memorial who came from areas in St. Paul or other areas in South Minneapolis. But they liked this area because it was a great value and there was good schools and the Grand Rounds and the Parkway system.
And going back to that larger overview we had with Dan Marckel looking at it, there's great access here. I mean, with 94 can take you right down into downtown or further south, but also takes you north into that northern tier of suburbs as well.
Correct.
With what, 694 isn't too far up there.
Right. Well, 94 attaches to 694 and 494, and of course you can take 49th to Highway 100 and go south to Edina and be there in 15 or 20 minutes. So it's a very, very accessible area of town, and it was, to me, it was sort of one of the attributes of the neighborhood that was somewhat of a sleeper. I had kind of forgotten about this area of North Minneapolis, and I realized I could get from Hennepin and Lake to this neighborhood in about 15 minutes. I could get to downtown Minneapolis in 5 to 10 minutes depending on traffic. Right. And I think between mass transit, if there's great bus service and great vehicular traffic, I think people will definitely enjoy living here.
For the sake of our viewers, you're with Country Home Builders, and you've been involved, your company has been involved with a number of other projects. Could you just briefly mention some of the other projects you're involved in?
Correct. We started building townhome communities and single-family neighborhoods in the early 80s. And they were driven by some of our own in-house designs and some of our marketing efforts, and we've been in business ever since. And frankly, we have built mostly in the suburban areas. Although I've been an urban dweller all of my life, I've built in Apple Valley, in Burnsville, in Eagan, in Woodbury, in Oakdale, to name a few. And we have active projects in all those communities right now that we're building and designing and marketing.
A couple coming up in line in Minneapolis as well.
Correct. We have returned and focused on some of the opportunities in Minneapolis that didn't previously exist. One of them, of course, is the Urban Village, which is in South Minneapolis in the Hennepin Lake uptown area.
Kind of right overlooking that 29th Street corridor there.
Correct. That'll be an exciting project. Very different than this development, but equally as exciting. And then also 1221 West Lake Street, which is the old police garage site, which is going to be both a commercial retail development along with just 6 units of townhouses that knits back into the neighborhood.
Oh, right close up into the uptown area there.
Correct.
Is that one.
Correct.
Sure.
Both of these are.
I can understand why you're always interested, because no two are the same, and you can always put your passions into the different projects.
Yep, they're all a challenge.
That's good. Gary, I want to get back to you for a second. This is a major project. How does it tie in with some larger Hennepin County goals? I think we've alluded to a few of them, but I want to kind of go back and visit that a little bit. Just from your point of view as a senior administrator at Hennepin County, how does Humboldt Greenway tie in with those goals and that mission?
Well, the county's looking at a number of these projects. Ross mentioned 29th Street and the Urban Village project. Those are projects that are being administered by my Community Works department. We are looking at projects that have kind of a linear nature to them, which covers a significant part of any community area within the city. And the whole goal, all the goals are similar: to rejuvenate, provide some infrastructure development in the community, to encourage property owners to reinvest in their properties so that the entire community lifts itself up.
Well, it sounds like an admirable goal. Quick impression, timeline here. What's the next stuff people are going to get in the next, here we are in the summer of '99. What's going to happen in terms of housing and roadway construction? You mentioned next year for Humboldt.
There are two things going on simultaneously. Our final design of the roadway,
Yeah.
which is under contract right now. There's quite an extensive review permitting process that has to be gone through. Simultaneously, Ross will be working on the housing project, and I understand there's a possibility of speeding some of that up, maybe even coincidentally or even preceding the roadway project.
We've been working with Hennepin County and the Design Center and BRW and our architect, A Studio, Aaron Parker, with the alignment of the roadway. That's in process now, and we're reaching the end of that design. Now we're going to review the market study by Maxfield Research and Quam Research and lay out the lots and where the housing types are going to go, where the lifestyle housing is going to go, where the single family is going to go, subdivide the land, and then we'll start designing the homes once we have the lots laid out.
The actual individual
Which is
homes.
coming up very soon. We have some really exciting house designs coming up that are in the works. Some are very traditional, some are traditional looking but have some new design ideas to them called side yard homes. We can talk about those maybe at another time.
Sure, get into the detail.
But we're getting into the detail. We hope to have models under construction and marketing underway at the same time that the roads are being developed. So we don't want to wait just for the roads to be developed and then start the housing. It's going to happen simultaneously.
there.
Yes, in the next building season.
Well, it sounds exciting.
Right.
I might add quickly that
Yes.
what's impacting the community right now is the acquisition of homes and relocation.
Right.
We've acquired 75 of the homes. Ross mentioned over 200. 45 have been removed.
Right.
And we are in the process, as soon as residences are relocated out of their home, we put out a
Demolition.
contract to demolish
Well, you
those
could
that
have
are
brought
there.
that up at a more opportune time because our next guests are going to talk about demolition and relocation.
Okay, very good.
Gary Erickson,
Exciting.
thank you very much. Pleasure
you.
to have you here. Ross, thank
Thanks,
you very
Phil.
much.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for braving the weather here. This is great. Now, as we just said, we're going to be taking a look at some of those specific issues and what it's meant to people who have been living here and what happens when they get moved and then the demolition of their old houses. Right after we hear from the folks that are hosting us here out at Fire Station number 20 on Humboldt, we're going to go to Deputy Fire Chief Jim Clack. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Deputy Chief Jim Clack of the Minneapolis Fire Department. We're here today at Station 20. Station 20 is one of 20 fire stations in Minneapolis. Engine 20 is one of our 20 engine companies. We also have 10 truck companies. The city is staffed with 109 firefighters per day. 70% of the runs that Engine 20 goes on per year are EMS calls. The other 30% are fire runs. The truck is staffed with 3 firefighters every day, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. The staff here works a 24-hour shift. They work a rotating schedule. They get 4 days out of 6 days off, but they do work a 56-hour work week. This engine is one of the less busy engines in the city. It's a little bit slower than some of the engines that are closer into downtown. It covers the very north end of Minneapolis, the end of Minneapolis closest to Brooklyn Center.
Well, thanks, Jim. I must say the crew out here at Station 20 have been absolutely fantastic to work with, and our thanks to those guys, a nicer bunch of guys, and women, I should say. Nicer bunch to work with I haven't found. You are watching Inside Minneapolis. We're up here at the Humboldt Greenway, a part of the project area. Behind us is Shingle Creek, just to orient you a little bit. And we've been talking so far about some of the big picture issues, about where the idea for this project came from, and some of kind of the design issues and some of the infrastructure issues. Now we're going to talk with two gentlemen who know what it means to actually help move the people out of their homes if they're the folks that need to be relocated, and to help them find some new place to live, as well as what then happens to the old property. And with me is Dave Fredlund, who's at the Minneapolis Community Development Agency, a colleague of mine. Dave,
Yes, sir.
nice to have you here.
Thank you.
And of course, Mike Williams, also a colleague at the MCDA. Mike helps folks with the demolition aspect of that. And I suppose we might as well take this sort of in a timely basis. Before we can demolish the homes, we have to talk with the people who are going to be relocated.
Right.
A project is announced. People hear about something, and it might be kind of vague, Dave, and all of a sudden they start realizing that, gee, maybe this is going to impact their lives. Can you walk us through kind of the timeline? What happens to these folks when they realize, gee, something might be coming my way, right to my door?
You're right. The government starts drawing lines around your neighborhood and saying everything inside of that is going to be acquired and the house is torn down. It's pretty frightening for those folks. For some, it's an opportunity, but it can be a very traumatic experience.
Right.
So,
when you say opportunity, what you're really saying is that for some folks, they've been thinking about going, or they're ready to go, or it might be a chance for them to kind of step up from what was a starter home. Is that what you mean by?
Right.
And they're motivated, maybe.
They're motivated. There may be people who move every couple of years too.
Oh, just kind of as a lifestyle.
Right, but there are those that have been there perhaps for 50 years as well, and those are the ones that can really be tough on. But government, when we do acquire property, we have the right to do that under what's called the right of eminent domain. We can take back privately held property. But the courts have held that we can't do that without providing adequate compensation. And there have been a number of laws passed that add extra burden to government when they're taking property through the relocation process. There are relocation benefits and services that we have to provide.
I mean, you not only have to make them whole, but you kind of have to help them through the process.
Right,
as I understand it.
exactly. So when we acquire property, we appraise it first of all with an independent appraiser that is employed by the agency, but not an employee, not beholden to the agency.
Your
That's
point
correct.
of view as
exactly.
an agency.
So they appraise the property. Well, we should get back a little bit. First of all, the people are notified that,
Good point.
we have a project going here. And they're notified that an appraiser will be out to appraise the property and at a mutually agreeable time, and they can accompany that appraiser through the process. Once that appraisal is completed and been reviewed, an offer goes out, and it should be the fair market value of that property. In addition to that, we also, now we're talking about homeowners in this situation, which is basically what we're displacing in this project. The appraisal, excuse me, let me go back just a little bit. When the appraisal is reviewed by the agency and that offer is made, they also have the right to go out and have their own appraisal made.
Okay.
And we will compensate them for that. So that gives them some protection there.
Right. Essentially, if they didn't really agree up
if
front
they didn't agree
with what
to
came
it,
in.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so if the appraisal is then made, and let's say you agree on a fair price, they're happy with the price.
Right.
What's the next thing that happens? They have to go somewhere.
Right. Well,
Or am I jumping too far?
I lost my thought there for a moment.
Oh.
The one thing that we also have to do in conjunction with that, with the appraisal, is to establish a comparable replacement property for them. And so we have to identify a property that's for sale, and that establishes the upper limit then of their relocation payment.
Okay.
For a homeowner, they can receive a payment that compensates them for the difference between what we pay them for their house and what it's going to cost them to buy comparable housing on the market. And that can be substantial. And of course, it's getting more and more expensive in this market.
These days, yeah.
Right. We have a very tight market. It's hard, in fact, to come up with comparable housing that's still available by the time we get it to
Let me interrupt you right there. Is because of the hot market right now, is that to some extent driving folks out of the immediate area to find relocation? Or is that a moot point, they go where they want to in any case?
Well, yeah, there aren't the opportunities right now in the city.
They have to look further afield.
They've expanded into the suburbs, certainly.
Okay.
But anyway, that payment is available to them then to purchase a replacement house. We also pay their closing costs.
Okay.
So there are many protections for these people through that relocation process.
Okay. Well, it sounds fairly comprehensive then. I mean, other than maybe their basic comfort with the whole idea of doing it, if it's going to happen, you pretty much walk them through from beginning to end. You're there for them, and they can move on then, get their lives back
Exactly.
in order.
That's right.
Once they're gone, Mike Williams, the house remains that they've been in for some time. In this case, they're here at the Humboldt area. And by the way, while we're talking, I should point out to our viewers, we're going to take a look at a montage of houses that existed in this area historically. And I think these go back a ways. But so we're left then with a series of houses, which in this case is going to be a couple hundred houses. And then the demolition process starts. And could you kind of walk us through what that is? I know it's not just a 1-2 checklist here. It's not just calling up a bulldozer.
It's a series of checklists. Once Dave here has the people relocated and they're out vacant, then Dave sends me a vacant construction notification along with our other property management, and we in turn go ahead and order the utility cuts. And then at that point, the Historical Society is notified of each property to notify them that that this property will be demolished and has to go through the proper channels to get signed off on.
And that's a very interesting step that I did not know until I talked with you earlier, that actually in this case, each house, there's a notification that goes to the Historical Society, but in most cases there's nothing determined that this is a particular house of great historic merit, but each house is looked at.
But each house is taken into consideration.
Sure.
And on this site, Humboldt Greenway, there are 4 or 5 sites that they are really looking into further, and there may be some significance in the historical value of a couple of them. So.
Right.
And then on the process goes further on and to the point where I start a survey, environmental survey of each property, and that takes approximately a week, 2 weeks to get that survey back.
And that's literally lot lines and making sure that the property that's been acquired and is now set for demolition is what you think it is.
Well, my survey is an environmental survey. It's a hazardous material survey.
Okay.
And each building or structure, they have to physically go in and take samples for asbestos, lead-based paint, any hazardous material, and that comes back to me in a written format.
Oh, I see. Okay. So that's a hazardous materials and site condition kind of a survey.
Site condition, yes.
Right. The other one I was referring to probably happened earlier on when
Much
actually
earlier.
the purchases. Okay.
Yeah.
Much earlier.
And then after that, after I receive that survey back, then I put it into a form of a bid spec and attach the hazardous material survey along with it.
Okay. And that goes out to contractors.
That goes out to the demo contractors, and they're available to look at it. And it goes along when they go to do the walkthrough of these properties. They have it, and they can visually see, okay, this is the target area here that we need to address.
Okay. And then at the end of the day, when something's demolished, in what shape do they leave the property then once it's demolished? Is it all at grade, essentially?
The very end product would be a grade, backfilled, topsoil and seeded.
Okay.
But prior to that, it takes approximately 3 to 4 days per structure on the property. And so as the people are driving through the neighborhood, they'll see various stages that the building will be in. They may see a rubble pile fenced off with a fence around it, and then at a different stage they might see an open hole with a fence around it, and the next day they come back and it's completely filled in and up to grade.
And that's the way it's supposed to end up.
And up to grade with grass seed.
Mike, we have just a minute left, but you were telling me too that there's an interesting and useful connection with the Green Institute on this particular project. Can you tell us what that is?
The Green Institute is getting involved with a lot of salvage or reuse of some of the things within inside the home, such as doors, cabinetry, some trim, molding, things like that. So we're trying to accommodate them to go in prior to the demolition and remove some of this.
So it's a nice kind of recycling effort.
Yes, it is.
Great. Dave, we're just about out of time. You've been involved with about how many of these relocations yourself?
Well, I did like maybe the first 50 properties,
50
and then we now have a consultant doing the balance.
Kind of outsourced that particular
exactly.
one, right, for the other 150 or so that
Yes.
are left. Okay, well, good for you, probably.
Yes, thank
Dave
you.
Fredlund, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A little overview of your process and on the demolition.
Phil.
Mike Williams, thank you very much. Well, coming up next, we're going to talk with 2 representatives from the local adjoining neighborhoods here. We're going to talk with Candy Sartell from the Lind-Bohanon neighborhood and Jim Bratton from the Shingle Creek neighborhood. But first, we're going to take a look and a listen to a wonderful woman who actually used to live right behind this fire station. She's been relocated. Her name is Mary Scott, and she's got a story to tell. So watch her, and then we'll be back.
We watched him tear the house down on Ulysses Street with the bulldozer. Knock it down. And I thought my oldest daughter was going to cry, and instead it was the youngest daughter. But they took pictures of me holding the hose to keep the dust down, and I hope I get the neighbors will tell me when the bulldozers come in here. I don't think I'll ever be moved again.
Yeah.
But when the freeway took the property on Ulysses Street, I didn't think I'd ever be moved again because 94 was going in east of us. I didn't think some crazy thing like Humboldt Greenway was going through. And I thought we were safe on little dead-end street, nice and quiet except for the trains. I first heard about it. We went to a meeting in Brooklyn Center, and they told about it and divided us into small groups to try to get us to go along with it. The Brooklyn Center dropped the idea, and Minneapolis picked it up. They want to beautify North Minneapolis to make it look like Memorial Drive. I think I knew I was going to have to move from the start because they called it the Humboldt Greenway. I'm 1 block off of Greenway. They couldn't widen it the other direction because the railroad ain't going to give them their property. So they have to come to Girard. They have to go my direction. When you're 81 years old, you don't like to live in limbo for 4 years.
No.
One woman, I don't think she's any older than me, she screamed out at a meeting, "If you're gonna take me, take me." That was the worst part. It took them 4 years or better.
4 years.
They keep you in limbo. They don't decide any certain person has to go. They give you the general idea of where the Greenway is going to go, but they never tell you exactly who they're taking and who they're not. I went to most all the meetings there is, and you can't pin them down. I felt perfectly safe. I'd have lived the rest of my life right there if they hadn't taken me. I think it's a good deal. Either way. Now I'm happy with where I'm at too. So as long as it's settled, and I got a good price, a nice house. So I'm perfectly happy with the whole works now.
Well, one of the neat things about Mary is just her energy. She really was out there, spending a lot of time with us and our camera crew. But an interesting thing about Mary and her family, she has been relocated not once but twice. She used to live in northeast Minneapolis over on Ulysses Street and was removed from there when 35W went through. That was many years ago. And guess where she moved? Up into the Humboldt area. And now she's been relocated again. So at 81 years old, Mary, I hope that's your last move. Now with me to talk about a couple of specific issues in terms of the neighborhoods, Lind-Bohanon and Shingle Creek, are folks who've been long active in those communities. I have Candy Sartell here, who's with the Lind-Bohanon neighborhood.
Yes.
Thanks for being here. This is a pleasure.
You.
And Jim Bratton, who I understand over in the Shingle Creek neighborhood, actually kind of helped get the whole idea started early on. I don't know if it goes on your shoulders or people in your neighborhood.
Well, we just talked about it one time during one of our business meetings because Humboldt was the kind of the skid row of Shingle Creek and Lind-Bohanon. It was the worst street on there. And somebody mentioned that if you take the worst street and turn it into something great, it enhances the entire neighborhood. And from there we just talked to other people, and then other people took it over, of course. We weren't driving it, we just...
So quite literally this started out in kind of just an informal session at one of your board meetings? 1992, okay, so that goes back a while.
Yeah.
And how did that proceed then? I mean, you're talking about it at a grassroots level, and I know other neighbors heard about it, but eventually this entity known as Hennepin County heard about it. How'd that happen?
Well, in our case, the way I perceived it was that being community activists, you know local politicians, and they know you, and so when we'd see them and we'd talk about it and mention it, and other people picked it up and said, well, we'll check on it, and I imagine they had 7 or 8 dozen studies, or I don't know how they do that, but...
and something like 60 meetings in a 2-week period, I
yeah,
heard, or
that
like
was
that.
when the neighborhoods got involved, as the entire neighborhoods, and then it just took off, and people got behind it. Of course, it took some people with the power and influence to drive it, but it being a good idea, it was a lot of work and a lot of hustle and hassle. However, a good idea will generate its own excitement.
Sure. Now, Karen,
There
go ahead.
was some opposition to the project too from residents that lived in the area. There was a lack of knowledge about the project, and we had some hurdles to overcome for this project, but I think at this point in time, everybody is behind this project. They'd like to see it move forward because there's a lot of people that would like to get on with their lives.
Right, now that the train is moving,
Right,
let's keep going with
exactly.
it. Roughly from a neighborhood point of view, how many hundreds of people, I know there's over a couple hundred houses, but how many hundreds of people are being affected by this? Are we talking thousands of people?
Well, if you talk about the neighborhood as a whole, whether they're being relocated by the project or not, Lind-Bohanon has approximately 1,800 households in it, and I don't recall what the number is for Shingle Creek. I think it's a little less than that.
Yeah.
Right, it's a little less than that. So in effect, everybody feels like they are being affected by this project, those that are immediately being removed in the acquisition phase right now.
Right, and they're right at ground zero.
Right, exactly.
Now, Kenny, when you first heard about it, what was your first impression? I mean, just gut feeling right off the bat.
No way.
Seriously?
No way,
Yeah.
yeah. I read about it in one of our local newspapers, and personally I had put thousands of dollars of rehabilitation into my house, and a neighbor came outside and said, "Why are you doing this?" and handed me the paper over the fence, which somehow did not end up on my doorstep. And so there was,
up to that point, you hadn't heard about it?
no, I hadn't heard about it. And granted, they said that there were some releases, news releases, there were some meetings. Somehow something got tripped up. It wasn't real well
It
advertised.
wasn't like they totally hid it, but it hadn't gotten to your knowledge yet.
Exactly. And there were a lot of people like that. And at that time, I was in the target area, so of course I was quite shocked
And
about
with
the
these
project.
thousands of dollars in there.
Right, exactly.
Sure.
There were a lot of uncertainties.
Oh, sure.
Nobody knew what was going to
Well, what I
happen.
found over the years is if people aren't up on something, they're usually down on it. And so it helps to learn and
Right.
make sure that people are. So you literally heard from a neighbor over the back fence.
Right.
That's good.
Right.
But your impression now, it seems to be much more positive.
Well, it is, because I can understand why they're doing it, and I think because the neighborhood has come around, and my feeling throughout this project was whatever you're going to do, we need to be compassionate and sensitive towards the residents that are being removed for the project. So.
And sometimes that necessarily slows things down a little bit,
Right.
so everybody is aware, kind of moving at the same pace. Now, Jim, I understand, and you're a smiling man, I think, today, but you actually are one of the relocatees.
Yeah.
What was that process like for you, and why are you so happy about it?
Well, I got, in all honesty, it almost sounds like I'm a cheerleader, but they treated me good. They were considerate every step of the way. I mean, it was like obviously they'd been through this before, eminent domain, all these things, and so they were really professional, but they took time, and they, I mean, I got a hearing every time I talked to them. I called them, I'd ask them questions, or I had a really good experience.
So that went a long way to making you feel comfortable with this.
Oh, yeah.
And then it sounds like in addition to that, both of you, and I'm talking about as individuals now, I know you're involved with your neighborhood groups, but as individuals, you're kind of excited about sort of the urban design opportunities here as well?
Right.
Beyond the particulars of a house here and a house there.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be beautiful.
Well, as I've listened to people like Dan Marckel, who was on earlier, and some of the other folks that are working on this, you already have a lot of lovely amenities here. You've got the Mississippi River, you've got Shingle Creek, and this great set of schools here, which, by the way, I think we have a montage of images of the schools in here, which is a great part of the community. There are a lot of layers of politics involved here. Certainly the county, the city, the neighborhood levels here. How has that worked? It sounds like in terms of relocation, that went fairly smoothly. In terms of the communication, has that been a good handoff from one unit to the next?
It's been great now. We have a steering committee that's set up to work with each level of involvement for all the different areas that are involved in this project, and there's more participation on behalf of the neighborhood. They have more input to this project, and Commissioner Opat is making sure that that is made available to us, that we do have our say. We have recommendations of what we would like to see in this project, and he is being very considerate about allowing that from the neighborhood level.
Okay.
So it has been a much smoother process, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest advantages that I have found is by being, me and Candy are both on that committee. All the
steering committee you're
referring
referring to.
committee.
Right.
And by witnessing the decision-making process, the decisions don't seem so arbitrary. I mean, a lot of times as a citizen, they all of a sudden come out with something and you say, well what made them do this? Yeah, why are they doing this? Well, we're sitting right there while they're discussing things, and it makes me a lot more comfortable with the decision. Even the ones I don't like, I know why they're doing it. You know?
Sounds like a good advertisement for actually having people at the table.
That's right.
And not just
if your
sending the word out.
attitude is to be part of the process and not a advocate just for the naysayers.
Yeah.
They're not
Right.
the only citizens in the neighborhood. They're the ones you hear about the most. And this is one of the things that I liked about it also is it gave the people in charge a chance to hear from people who weren't entirely negative on the project. I mean, you get way more complaints than pats on the back as a bureaucrat, politician, or any public
neighborhood activist. I'll bet.
neighborhood
Sure.
activist. You hear from them when they're mad.
Yeah.
Well, by having citizens that are active in the community who have have shown by their actions that they're willing to work for the neighborhood, not just complain about it, then they get a better feeling. They can go and ask us, for instance, this is what I got a phone call the other day about such and such, and then we can give them feedback as
Right.
to what is that a legitimate or is this widespread or is this just this somebody, there's some people that would be mad if they was hung with a new rope, they're never happy.
As I think I might speak up
Yeah.
on that issue myself. Is NRP involved through each or either of your neighborhoods? Is there a link with the NRP process?
Well,
or is that sort of separate?
Shingle Creek has given $200,000 of their NRP dollars towards, I think it's the demolition phase of this project.
One little section that
Right.
wasn't in the plan, but they wanted to take it out, and so we funded it with our NRP funds so they could buy the property and demolish the houses.
Because it made sense to your neighborhood.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And Lind-Bohanon has chosen to do theirs in a way that's maybe not immediately understood or obvious to people, but we put a lot of our money into our housing, our loan improvement programs for housing, because we're concerned about the houses that will be left and how to bring those up to the standard of the neighborhood that as it will be with
Which
the newer
sounds like
housing.
a great connection
Right.
to the aspirations of this project.
Right.
I mean, get the existing housing spiffed up a bit, bring in the new housing.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good.
One of them, I have mixed emotions about the project and things like this tape in particular, because I have always been rather smug about the fact that Shingle Creek is so unknown that we kind of have it all to ourselves. Nobody knows about it up here. And I think people are going to find out about Shingle Creek and Lind-Bohanon and all the amenities because of the publicity over the project. And we may have carpetbaggers coming in from South Minneapolis.
And you'll be right there at the gate, I'll bet. Actually, it's interesting you mentioned that because a couple of previous guests did talk about this in terms of it being kind of a sleeper project or a stealth project.
Yep.
Not that it's not a great project, but it hasn't seemed to generate, kind of the downtown controversy that some other projects do.
Or Minnehaha would have created. You do anything to Minnehaha or Calhoun, and the whole world knows, it seems. And up here, we just kind of.
Well,
it's nice.
Well, lest this become only a love feast, is there one thing you would do differently? Is there one thing that if you could, you'd change about this, whether it's the process or the end product?
I think we would have started the process out with bringing the design center in and doing the smaller citizen participation group meetings from the beginning, more publicity so that people are aware of this up front rather
more
than
on the up front.
right,
Load it up
exactly,
there.
is this idea of citizen participation, to do it in a way that is inclusive, brings everybody in instead of, we don't want your say, because after all, we are the people that live here. This is our neighborhood, and we know our neighborhood, and we know what we want too.
Sure.
And there is a big interest on the part of the community as a whole how this project is going to turn out, and I think as it progresses, they're becoming even more interested in all the little parts of this project, to the naming of whether Humboldt Greenway is going to be called something else, whether the actual street will be a different name. So.
And from your point of view?
Well, my biggest frustration would probably be the decisions about the type of housing that's going in and how it's going to be formulated. Like I said, being in the committee, I can understand why they're doing it, but I would prefer a little bit different construction types.
Okay. It sounds like that conversation can keep going on to some extent.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Could. Yeah.
We're just out of time, but in a word, if you were to use one word to describe your feelings about the project right now?
Excited.
Excited?
Yes.
Same?
And beautiful.
Wonderful. Well, pleasure to have you both on and learn a little bit
you.
more from your two neighborhoods' point of view.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we're going to take a look at our feature that we call What the Heck Is That? And of course, it happens to be something from right here in the Humboldt Greenway project area. So we're going to go out and hear from a few folks who give us a few of the wrong answers to that. And then later on, we'll get the right answer. So let's listen.
think they are recycling some cardboard at some sort of recycling bin area.
Some sort of massive springs that are wrapped up.
I think that is a compressor of trash compressor.
Well, it looks like bundles of recycled cardboard on a platform of some sort.
I really have no idea, but if I had to guess, it looks like some sort of cardboard recycling, crushing, something like that. And that's about the best I can do.
Yeah, it looks like some kind of government conspiracy maybe. Toxic waste maybe, I don't know.
I think it's a car washing building plant. A car wash building plant.
So maybe for some reason they're washing the recycled cardboard. I don't know, but that's the only thing that makes any sense to me.
No, actually, it looks like it's some kind of a recycling plant or something like that. I don't know. I'd have to say, what the heck? I have no idea.
Well, after those answers, I think we ought to go and get the right answer to what the heck that is, and we're going to learn from Harry Schleeter. He's over at Broadway Equipment. Harry?
Thanks, Phil. What you're looking at is a used rollover car wash with about 100,000 car washes, about 1 million car washes on it. Broadway Equipment makes used rollover car washes similar to what you would see in a gas station, but we make them for car dealers. So most of the car dealerships you go into, when they wash their car, they would wash it with a Broadway car wash. It's quite often for them to wash 500,000 to 1 million cars with one of our units before they replace it. These are units they've chosen to replace. We will now rebuild them and sell them as used equipment to somebody else. So that's what Broadway Equipment does. Now back to you, Phil.
Well, thanks, Harry. That was interesting to know what the heck that is. Now, next month on Inside Minneapolis, we're going to take a look at another corridor in Minneapolis, the South Hennepin corridor, from roughly Franklin Avenue all the way down to Lakewood Cemetery. Now, at the end of this show, make sure you get your paper and pencils out, because we always have our catalog of useful resources, and paired with that this month is a wonderful old photo of the Lyndale Hotel that existed in this part of Minneapolis from 1888 to 1912. And then at the end of the show with the credits, we have a photograph of the Weber Park swimming pool, and that photo's from 1953. Also, keep in mind, if you want to find out more about this show, you can call the City Cable 34 hotline, 673-2234. And for more information, you can also get on our website. That's www.mcda.org. That's it from Fire Station 20. We'll see you next time on Inside Minneapolis. I'm Phil Lindsay. Thanks, folks. Appreciate your help.